Yo, I done 6 shows in a row, so my voice is hurting. Fans wanna hear what you're in person. Boy, oi. She want a man from Brum, but she settled with a boy from Burton. I still see feds on the block, still see the boy them lurking.
Hi there guys, Adam from the Beard Solution here. Now in this video I'm going to be doing a guide to using minoxidil for beard growth, in which I'm going to try and cover pretty much everything. I'm going to treat this as kind of an FAQ. So I get questions all of the time, and a lot of the time I've already done videos on them, but people don't know where to find them. Big shout out to Matt who suggested this, one of my subscribers. I actually was going to do one of these at some point, but I thought why not do it? It's Saturday night. I've got fuck all to do, so let's do this. So without further ado, it is time for the Beard Solution, Minoxidil Beard, FAQ. That rhymed, you're welcome. Let's get into this. Okay, so it wouldn't be much of an FAQ if I didn't start by explaining to you exactly what minoxidil is, okay? Now you might have heard of the product Rogaine, or Regain, depending on where you are in the world. Now the active ingredient that actually makes Rogaine and Regain work is minoxidil, okay? So minoxidil is a drug, and it's typically used for crownal balding. That's what it's FDA approved for. But it didn't start out that way. So I'll give you a brief rundown of the history, okay? In the 1950s, clinical trials in dogs were conducted to try and treat ulcers, and it didn't work. But what they did find was that it was a very good vasodilator, which meant that it was good at lowering blood pressure and increasing blood flow. So in the 1960s, the early 1960s, they conducted 2 clinical trials, okay, which found that in humans, it was a very good blood pressure medication, but it did have the odd side effect of growing hair. So it took around about 25 years before they finally developed a topical solution for men to use on their scalps in order to combat androgenic alopecia, fight crownal balding, okay? Now, that being said, there were doctors prescribing this off-label, so they're given the oral pill of minoxidil to balding patients as early as the 1980s, the early 1980s, okay, to combat the loss of hair on the scalp. That's called an off-label usage. It just means that they're using it for something it wasn't intended for. Now, off-label usage isn't necessarily dangerous. It's just that that's not its approved use, because at the time that wasn't minoxidil's approved use. Nowadays, minoxidil's typically only really used for the product Rogaine and the many variants of generic brands that are now out there. You can literally use any of them to regrow hair. Now we're using it off-label for our face in order to grow a beard, and the principles are essentially the same. Whilst scientists don't fully understand how minoxidil works, what they do know is that it increases blood flow, lowers blood pressure, and it also opens potassium channels as well. All of these things will have a factor in hair growth, but they don't fully understand exactly how it works. Now, in terms of the face, where we're using it, you have a lot of people out there on the internet, particularly fully bearded men, who want to tell you it's dangerous, don't do it. Oh no, don't do it. Remember, just because something isn't FDA approved and we're using it off-label doesn't necessarily mean it's dangerous. So let's look at whether it's safe next. Is minoxidil safe? Well, yes, it is. It's perfectly safe to use on your beard. In fact, there was a clinical trial conducted by the Department of Dermatology at the School of Anti-Aging and Regenerative Medicine in Thailand that found that minoxidil was perfectly safe and effective for beard enhancement. Now, some of the larger YouTubers like Beard Baron have tried to say that because the face is more absorbent, that you're going to apply and absorb too much and therefore you'll pass out and shit like that. Never known anybody to ever faint using this shit. And also he's forgetting that the vertex of the scalp is a much smaller surface area than the face, and we're applying the same amount that we would usually apply on the scalp to the face, so it's probably going to be about the same effect that you would get from applying it on the scalp. Okay, similar kind of side effects, similar kind of effects, no real difference there, okay? So whilst he made some good points, he missed out some clear elements. Then you just got people like Gray Bailey who try and scaremonger. So if you want to go and listen to them, by all means feel free. You don't have to use minoxidil for beard enhancement, but it does work and it is perfectly safe. Okay guys, so there are 2 different types of minoxidil. There is the liquid, there is the foam. Now before some smart ass tries to get clever and say, actually there's a third one, it's the spray. No, that's just a different way of applying the liquid, okay? Now if you are using the spray, between 6 to 8 sprays is said to be about a milliliter, so try and stick to that and then rub it in. If you're using the liquid, it comes with the dropper, which you only need to take a ml and apply it, okay? If you're using the foam, it's half a cap, which is 1 ml, in sized cans like this, okay? If you're using certain brands like Gain, which have 3 months in one bottle, you'll notice that the cap size is much, much bigger. Okay, so you don't want to do half a cap with this. It's just one singular pump. Okay, that's all you need to use. Now, in terms of the differences between the two products, there has actually been no comparative study to say which one is better than the other. Okay, now there is a comparative analysis that's completely different. That's where they take different studies and compare them. So it's not the best scientifically. You can't really draw very conclusive conclusions. Okay, what that found though, or what that suggested, was that they are about as effective as each other, with liquid being absorbed slightly better. Now, liquid uses a carrier called propylene glycol, okay, which causes a lot of dryness in people, okay, and a lot of people will get dryness on their face. Not particularly very nice. The foam typically uses a glycine carrier where you won't get dryness. I don't get any dryness from using that particular type of foam. This type of foam, Follogain and Q-Gain, do have propylene glycol, so you probably are going to get dryness from them as well. Now, there are several different benefits from picking one over the other. Personally, I prefer foam, but feel free to use liquid as well. It's much cheaper in general than the foam is, but I personally just prefer the foam. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about application frequency, and I'm going to bring a few things in here so it should cover a few elements of questions people may have. Now, you should apply minoxidil twice a day. Typically, you can use it once a day, but twice a day is better. Now, I'll explain why twice a day is better. Whilst there is no comparative study to show the differences between once versus twice, there have been comparative studies between 2% twice a day versus 5% once a day, in which they were found to be working pretty much the same. However, 5% twice a day versus 2% twice a day, 5% was shown to be significantly better. So what we can say from that logically is that twice a day, 5% is better than once. Does that mean that more than twice a day is better? No, studies have shown that our bodies can only absorb a certain amount, which is why it even says on the bottle, applying more than directed will not necessarily increase results, but may increase side effects. So applying it 3 times a day is not going to help you. In terms of spreading out your applications, you want to wait 12 hours between each application typically, okay? This is because minoxidil has a half-life of 22 hours, which means that the amount of minoxidil in your system will drop to half after 22 hours. So twice a day, with that 12-hour gap, you will reach optimum levels of minoxidil in your system. Now, you can do it after 10 hours, and with exception, occasionally 8 hours, but you want to try and give it as close to that 12-hour gap as possible. So an example of this, you might apply at 7 in the morning and 7 in the evening. Now, you shouldn't wash minoxidil off for 4 hours after applying. You should wait 4 hours, whether you're using the liquid or the foam. Now, after about 4 hours, about 75% of the product is actually absorbed. So if you're washing it off before, you're getting less in your system, and it might mean that you slow down your progress in the long run. Give it 4 hours, and then you can do things like wash and moisturize. So now I've told you a little bit about minoxidil, how often you should apply it. One of the things I want to touch on is actually how to apply it. So I'm not going to be able to show you applying these in this video, and that's because applying 2 ml in one go would not be a particularly good idea. So I'm just going to talk to you very quickly about them, and I'll also link some videos in the description and pop some cards up here as well for you to go to the videos that I have on this. So in terms of the liquid, and whether you're using the spray or the dropper, okay, the spray, 6 to 8 sprays, rub it in with your hands, or you can just leave it to rest on your face. The dropper, you can get 1 ml, drop it on your face, rub it in with the dropper, and then the foam, this type of foam, you take half a cap, you scoop it out, you put it on your face. As I say, I'll have put some cards up here as well, and some links in the description for you to go and watch if you're confused about how to apply this. So is brand important? In my opinion, no. Most people will support this opinion. As long as it is 5% minoxidil, you can use anything. You can use any of those brands, okay? Now, you want to look out for, there are certain brands with anti-androgens in. I believe Regrow is one of them. But generally speaking, you can use any brand of minoxidil and it will work. Now, there is a caveat to that. Some countries, there are less regulations on products, so you might want to opt for importing from overseas. But generally speaking, it's 5% minoxidil. It is perfectly fine, perfectly safe. In fact, most brands of minoxidil are actually manufactured by the same manufacturer. They just stick a different label on the front. So it's perfectly up to you. I personally just go for what's cheapest because I'm British and we're tight. So yeah. So how long does it take to start seeing results? Well, it's different for everybody. Because obviously everybody reacts differently to minoxidil. But what I can say is in general, people start to see decentish results around about week 13, between week 10 and week 13, which is between 2 to 3 months, okay? Some people, very occasionally, will see results sooner. Some people later. It really depends on how good your body is at metabolizing minoxidil into minoxidil sulfate, which is the active form of minoxidil. That's essentially what it's dependent on. So if your body has a hard time doing that, your results might be slower than some people who seem to have been using it for a month and have pretty good coverage, okay? So again, it's different for everybody, but as a general rule, I would say 3 months is where you should start to see some elements of changes and development. That might sound long to some of you, but if it's something that you really want, then it's just about being patient and consistent. Okay, so over the next few sections I'm going to explain why minoxidil beard gains are permanent, but to do that I need to explain to you the difference between scalp hair and facial hair, and also the 3 different types of hair that we've referred to on this journey, okay? So our scalp hair and our beard hair are completely different. Beard hair is called androgenic hair, meaning that it's caused by a hormone called dihydrotestosterone. Now this same hormone in some people that are genetically sensitive can cause male pattern baldness, okay? So they're caused by the same hormone. So that is the difference between scalp and androgenic hair. Okay, so there are different types of hair. There is vellus hair, there is terminal hair. We also refer to something called transitional hair, which is actually just a vellus hair, but it resembles more and more what a terminal hair would typically look like, okay? It's somewhere between the 2 characteristics. Now I touch on this in great detail on my video, the difference between vellus and terminal hairs, so do feel free to go and check that out. I will put a link in the description. I'm not going to do that on this video, but what I will say is that vellus hairs have to shed out and be replaced with a terminal hair. They cannot become a terminal hair, okay? Terminal hairs are typically thick, coarse, darker in pigmentation. They tend to be pigmented, like my hairs on my chin here. Vellus hairs tend to be short, thin, translucent, and with minoxidil we can get something that we call transitional hairs, which get some level of pigmentation, like a terminal hair would, and they grow longer because minoxidil forces them to, but they're still just a vellus hair. Now another thing that we talk about all the time is how long does it take for vellus hairs to shed out and be replaced with terminal hairs. Remember, they must shed out, they can't turn into terminal hairs. Now it is indeterminate, it can take different for everybody. There is no way to answer it, and I know that is frustrating, but it's the truth. And anybody that tried to tell you 6 months, a year, 2 years or whatever like that, nonsense. It takes as long as it takes, okay? There's no other answer to it. Minoxidil beards, are they permanent? Well, if you look at what I've discussed in terms of the differences between scalp and facial hair, the differences in types of hair, it will all begin to make sense now, okay? So on the scalp, when people use minoxidil, it's a lifetime usage. And the reason for that is because once they stop, the hormone dihydrotestosterone will begin to miniaturize the follicles again. It's not going to do that on your beard because dihydrotestosterone causes beard growth. But there is a caveat to that. If your hairs are still vellus or transitional vellus, because remember they are still just vellus, they don't have the necessary blood vessel structure to the dermal papilla where the hair attaches to continue to bring the appropriate levels of nutrients and androgens to actually cause the hair to grow. Okay. Terminal hairs, on the other hand, are located deeper within the subcutaneous tissue. They have much stronger network of blood vessels. They bring more blood, which is oxygen rich, nutrient rich and androgen rich, to cause the hair to continue to grow. Okay, so those hairs are permanent. Now, that's backed up by science. People often confuse the difference between scalp and facial hair, so they make the assumption that you'll lose your facial hair as well. Okay, it's not the case. We have documented examples of that. Now, in terms of people that claim that they lost their beard gains, it's because the hair was vellus or transitional. And like I said before, it can be hard to tell the difference, so I have done a video on that. That is in the description. But if you quit too early, and as I say, early, it's an indeterminate amount of time, but if you quit before it's terminal, you're going to lose it. If you obtain terminal hairs, they will stay upon the completion of your minoxidil beard journey. Dermarolling. Whilst not necessary, it is highly recommended by myself and others. Now, I have here 0.5, 0.75, 1mm. Don't get higher than 1mm. It's professional use only. For home use, get yourself a 0.5mm. Now, in terms of what this is good for, it's good for follicle stimulation and also collagen production. Okay, it's been shown in studies to improve the results of minoxidil, and that was a study on the scalp. we're obviously using the same logic to apply it to our face, since it's got nothing to do with DHT here. It's to do with the collagen production and also the hair follicle stimulation. Okay, 0.5mm, use it once a week. You can use it twice a week. Don't use it any more than twice a week, I would say. Once a week is perfectly fine. 0.75, I would say probably once every 10 days at the earliest. 1mm every 2 to 4 weeks, okay? So get yourself a 0.5 is my personal opinion. Now, a few things to consider with this. We shouldn't apply minoxidil for 24 hours after we have dermarolled, okay? Now, the reason that we don't apply minoxidil after we've dermarolled, there's several. It actually causes microabrasions on your face, small little cuts that you can't see. It's part of its process, okay? So if you go applying minoxidil, it's going to go systemic straight away and into your bloodstream. That's going to cause more side effects. It's not something you want to do. Another aspect of why we don't want to apply it straight away is because minoxidil is typically alcohol-based as well in its carriers, and so it's advised by many dermarolling websites not to apply any irritants, of which alcohol is, to your skin after dermarolling. Moisturiser is fine. Use a light moisturiser, you're perfectly fine, okay? Another aspect we need to consider is that the actual production of collagen could potentially be inhibited by minoxidil, because minoxidil has been shown in test tube studies and studies on rabbits to inhibit collagen production, okay? So you don't want to risk it. It's not necessarily proven in humans 100%, but you don't want to risk it. Now, that always brings up the question about wrinkles. Will minoxidil give me wrinkles? Well, this will offset any potential for that. But also, what we need to consider is the fact that, as I say, the collagen inhibition is not proven, and we only use minoxidil for a limited time. In terms of using this, it is an up and down motion 10 times, side to side 10 times, diagonal 10 times, and the other way diagonal 10 times over each area of the face, okay? Just do that across the whole thing. Then you wait 24 hours, then you apply again. You can use this 4 hours after you have applied minoxidil. So you can apply minoxidil, wait 4 hours, wash it off, use the dermaroller, wait 24 hours, and use minoxidil, okay? That is what I would recommend with the dermaroller. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to answer, and it is probably the last time I'm ever going to answer this, shaving. Yes, you can shave on your beard journeys. Now, I will say you should never use an electric razor because they will tug and pull on your hairs. They are crap. Don't use them, okay? Now, razors, what you need to know is that you need to be using a freshly sharpened razor or a new razor, okay, because they're less likely to pull and tug and pluck the hairs out. They're better at cutting the hairs because they're sharp, obviously. Another thing to consider, technique, okay? You should always shave with the grain, not against the grain, okay? That's called the direction of growth. Against the grain if you're going against the direction, with the grain if you're going with the direction of hair growth. Hair generally grows down, so you want to be shaving down, not upwards. The reason you don't want to shave upwards is because you'll get things like razor bumps. Not everyone will get them, but you can definitely get them, especially if you have curly facial hair. You'll also pluck hairs more often, and you will potentially get more ingrown hairs, which can be quite painful. So don't shave against the grain, basically, shave with. Okay, so now I'm going to talk really quickly about trimming. So trimming, I personally favour it over shaving, although as I said earlier, you can shave. It has some distinct advantages. You're less likely to pluck any hairs out, but do make sure that you buy a decent pair of trimmers and you keep the blades oiled regularly. And also make sure that if your trimmers do get wet, you dry them out, don't let them get all rusty. I would invest in a decent pair of trimmers because they're going to last you a lot longer and they're going to be a lot better for your hair. They'll be a lot better quality. They're less likely to rip and tug out those hairs, okay? Now, that being said, trimming is really good for the actual application. So if you've got shorter hairs, it's a lot easier to apply minoxidil. Doesn't mean you can't grow your beard out, because I've done it before, but it does make it easier. In terms of absorption, I agree to a degree. It might impede absorption if you let it grow out a little bit, but at the same time, people who use minoxidil on their heads will regrow their hair. They don't shave their hair down every time they want to apply minoxidil. That would just be stupid. So it's not going to impede absorption a great deal. You can perfectly grow your facial hair out if you want to. Trimming, in my opinion, is preferable over shaving, but do make sure that you invest in a decent pair of trimmers. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about DHT blockers and why, in general, you should avoid them. Okay, so DHT blockers or anti-androgens essentially block the hormone dihydrotestosterone, either binding to the androgen receptor or stopping the enzyme 5-alpha reductase from converting testosterone to dihydrotestosterone. I said earlier in this video about how DHT is basically good for your face, good for your beard area. It's going to make your beard grow. Your scalp, different story if you have androgenic alopecia. It's going to miniaturize follicles, make your hair fall out. And if you don't have androgenic alopecia, then it's not really going to make much difference using a DHT blocker in your scalp. But DHT blocker is good for your scalp because of that very reason. They block DHT. If you suffer from male pattern baldness, good to use there. On your beard, in theory, no. You're going to be blocking the hormone dihydrotestosterone binding to androgen receptors, or actually being converted at the follicle level from testosterone to dihydrotestosterone, which means in theory, you're going to be slowing your maturation rate and the linear growth of your facial hair. That's as much as we know. We don't have much evidence to back it up. There is studies on anti-androgens that have been used on like women, oral versions, to make their facial hair fall out when they've had unwanted facial hair growth, but nothing as of yet have been studied with men, so we can't say for sure. In theory, avoid them. If you can't avoid them, feel free to use them. I personally will try and avoid them as best as I can, but have used them from time to time. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about some oils that you can use. Jojoba, Jamaican black castor oil, and castor oil. These aren't DHT blockers. Whilst they do have oleic and gamma-linoleic acids, they are at quite low concentrations, so they're generally considered safe oils to put on your beard. Now, all they will do is actually help condition your hair and stop you from getting split ends and breakages. That's it. They're not going to make your hair grow. They're not going to make your hair turn terminal. Whoever says that, they're talking bullshit. It's actually impossible for vellus to become a terminal hair. They're completely different types of hair, as I've discussed earlier in this video. So, in terms of what you can add to give it some scent, particularly with Jamaican black castor oil, as I don't particularly like Jamaican black castor oil smell, you can add peppermint essential oil at a 5% dilution maximum. To get 5%, you just add 1 drop per 1 milliliter of carrier oil. So if you have 100 milliliters of carrier oil, then you add 100 drops. If you're working with fluid ounces, it's about 30 milliliters to a fluid ounce, so just convert it and then figure out how many drops you'll need. Remember, peppermint essential oil, 5% maximum, because anything more than that, it's caustic, it could cause some burns to your skin. So you want to be safe with this kind of stuff. Now, it has been shown in a study on rodents, which can often be replicated in humans, but not always, that it could help regrow hair faster than minoxidil, both at a 3% dilution. Whether that will bode the same for humans, it's hard to say. But if we use the assumption that it will, it doesn't say anything about new hair growth. In my opinion, it's talking about hair regrowth. So I think it may help with growth rate, but I can't say for sure whether it's going to give you new hairs or improve the amount of facial hair that you actually have. But the speed of growth, it could quite possibly do. So it's something to consider potentially adding. You don't need to add it in. There is some theories behind, as I say, why it would help, some scientific evidence to back it up, although it isn't particularly strong. So we are working on some level of assumption there. Okay, so now I'm really briefly going to talk about supplements and things that you can take to help support your journey. So things that you should definitely be taking are vitamin D3 and vitamin B12, because generally speaking, the population are deficient in them. So they're things that are going to help the general health of your body, but also have some secondary effects on your hair growth. Now, Chemos over at Beard Profile actually did do a video on supplements that you should be taking, so I'm going to link that in the description for those who want to find out in more detail. In terms of things like biotin, it's only going to help you if you are deficient in biotin, and most people aren't. So you need to consider whether you need to take it or not. Most people don't. If you do choose that you want to take it, you don't need 10,000 micrograms. A lot of people go for those extremely high doses. You don't really need to take that much. If you are going to take that much, make sure that you drink plenty of water. Now, when you're taking supplements, generally speaking, you're not going to absorb as much from supplements as you would from food, so they generally have higher dosages than what you would expect. So 3,000 micrograms of biotin will probably be sufficient if you do decide to take it. Again, make sure you drink plenty of water. Folic acid is potentially dangerous in men at high levels over a prolonged period of time. It's been linked with things like prostate cancer. But we do get generally enough within our diets anyway, and it is good for men as well at the correct dosage. If you are going to take a supplement, make sure you're taking less than 1,000 micrograms. Anything more than that is potentially dangerous, as I say. Below that, you're looking at 200 micrograms, 400 micrograms as your kind of area that you want to be between. nothing more than 1,000 micrograms. Okay, so that's all you need to take. There's other supplements as well, things like boron, booty superba, creatine if you're working out at the gym. Those things are going to potentially help boost DHT. There's some evidence that they will boost DHT, okay, which is good for our facial hair growth. So you might want to consider taking those, but again, they are perfectly optional. You don't need to take them. In terms of supplements, I would just personally recommend vitamin D3, vitamin B12, because those are the things that we're generally deficient in. Okay, so I'm now going to talk to you about genetics, because this is often misunderstood within the Minoxidil Beard community, with a lot of people going, we've proved genetics wrong. No, you haven't, because genetics is still 100% important to beard growth. Now, if you don't have the genetics, Minoxidil is not going to work for you. If you do have the genetics, but they just haven't been expressed, because that can happen, that's why some people grow beards much later in life than others, and why some people go bolder later in life than others, it's for gene expression, okay? So those hair follicles might be dormant at the moment, but Minoxidil is essentially going to activate them, if they're there. Now, if you don't have the follicular pattern, a hair's not going to grow there. So some people do actually miss the follicular pattern here, sometimes under their lip as well. Now, I am obviously only able to grow kind of a soul patchy shape now. Probably not going to be able to ever get the full underlip. That's genetics, okay? It's nothing to do with, you know, I'm not using the product properly. It's genetics. There's certain areas for me that just won't grow, and that's completely normal, okay? Now, with that being said, it's not to say that just because you don't have a beard now, you won't be able to achieve one using Minoxidil. Everyone's results vary, but as long as you have the follicular pattern there and you're responsive towards Minoxidil, then you're going to see some gains. Now, another question that I get asked quite regularly is whether smoking will affect your beard journey. Now, it's actually the nicotine in smoking that does cause some hindrance to our journeys and our facial hair growth. Now, whilst nicotine does raise DHT, it also is a vasoconstrictor, which means that it raises blood pressure and reduces blood flow, which means you're going to get less blood flow to your follicles, which means less nutrients, less oxygen, and less androgens, even though you've raised the levels of them. So yes, smoking is going to have a negative effect on your beard journey. Now, you may have heard of an online community called NoFap, which advocate the stopping of masturbating. Now, NoFap has certain benefits like breaking your addiction to things like porn, psychological benefits and whatnot. So I'm not here to trash on NoFap. But a lot of people will do it for beard enhancement and it doesn't work. So they'll use it because there is a misinterpretation of a study which showed that on the 7th day of stopping masturbating, your testosterone levels actually spike. But on the 8th day, they fall back to normal. So NoFap is not going to help your beard in any particular way because it's only one day where you're going to notice a spike in testosterone. So over the period of your journey, it's not going to make any difference to you whatsoever. If you do choose to do it for other reasons, that's perfectly fine. You don't need to beat your meat, but it's not a reason to stop if you're doing it just for your beard. If you want to break things like pornography addiction and whatnot, go ahead by all means. But in terms of the beard, it's not going to do anything for you. Okay guys, so Minoxidil is a drug. And being a drug, it's going to have side effects. I'd also like to caveat this with, Minoxidil's not a fucking toy. So if it says only use 1 ml twice a day on the bottle, don't use more than that, okay? It's not a fucking toy. You wouldn't do it with other drugs. Use it as directed. Otherwise, you're going to get more severe side effects, as I've discussed earlier in this video. With Minoxidil, there are many side effects that you could potentially get. I'm going to focus on the main ones. Then I'm going to focus on some of the lesser known ones. Then I'm going to talk about some that aren't side effects of Minoxidil, but people always think are, okay? So, water retention is a side effect of Minoxidil. It doesn't happen very often from what I understand. It's never happened to me. The way you can combat it is to take more water in and reduce your salt intake, your sodium intake, okay? Do those, you should be golden, should reduce, okay? Another thing, heart palpitations, dizziness, headaches. Those three things can be reduced by lowering your dosage. So I would say when you're starting out with Minoxidil, start with 1 milliliter once a day for 2 weeks before slowly building up to 2 milliliters. That's my own personal opinion. It will allow your body to adjust to it. That's what I did. I actually did it for 11 weeks. I used 1 ml. But that's my personal opinion. It's a drug, so we should be careful, get our bodies used to it first before we start going to the higher dosage. Now, there are several side effects there that I've discussed. Okay, there are more that you can find online. I would generally trust things like the Minoxidil leaflets rather than things that people have put on forums, which I'll discuss in a moment. So those are just some of the more known ones, okay, some of the more obvious ones. So now we'll look at some of the less obvious ones, and I'll discuss as I go through as well why they happen and also ways you could potentially treat them if they are treatable. Okay guys, so one of the side effects that I'm going to touch on very briefly is scalp shedding, because I get asked a hell of a lot about this, and yes, it's a very worrying side effect when it first happens to you. It's happened to me twice, and first time it happened, I was about 4 weeks in, and I was like, holy fuck, what is going on? I nearly stopped, but then I took some time to actually read a bit more into it. I understood it's a perfectly normal side effect that is experienced by scalp users as well. Now, to explain this, I must point out that just because you apply Minoxidil to your beard doesn't mean it's not going to affect hair growth in other areas of your body, okay? It can go systemic into your bloodstream, system-wide, and cause hair growth elsewhere. One of them is on the scalp. Now, to explain why you lose hair on the scalp from using Minoxidil, because it sounds really odd, but it is completely normal, is 3 phases of the hair cycle. Because the hair on your scalp is not the same hair you were born with. It is in a constant progressive cycle of shedding out and being replaced with new hairs. The first phase, anagen, which is where the hair is growing. Second phase, catagen, which is where the hair detaches from the root. So the root actually detached from the dermal papillae and it rests in your scalp, which is the third phase, telogen. It's resting. Fourth phase kind of sheds out, okay? So it falls out. You just don't notice this happening. 15% of the hairs on your head are in the telogen phase. Now, as I said, Minoxidil can get in your bloodstream and cause hair growth elsewhere, and particularly on your scalp, it will cause a rapid anagen state that will push all of those hairs, telogen hairs, out with new anagen hairs. Okay, so just new hairs growing through. So it might affect you for several weeks, and you'll be like, I'm losing a lot of fucking hair. It's just old hair being pushed out by new hairs. Nothing to worry about. Okay, so unwanted hair growth. That is definitely a side effect of Minoxidil that you might experience early in your journey, later in your journey, but most people will suffer from it at some point. The good news is that it is unlikely to go terminal, okay, which means that it's likely to fall off once you've quit Minoxidil. But a lot of people report unwanted hair around here, but I know for me, my arms got a lot hairier, my legs got a lot hairier, a lot of other areas got a lot hairier, okay? Now, it doesn't really bother me. And I've actually come to kind of accept the stuff that grows up here, so if it does go terminal, it won't really bother me. The reason why it won't bother me, because I know a lot of people do panic about the stuff up around here, most naturally bearded men have hair up around here. And they just line it up. And for me, I'd rather have a beard and just line it up. As I say, it's very unlikely to be permanent hair. Very unlikely to go terminal. There's always a possibility with everything that we do, but it's very unlikely to go terminal, okay? So don't worry about it too much. Ways you can deal with it: pluck it, wax it, shave it, or leave it. So you've got a few options there. You can thread it as well. There's a 5th one for you. But unwanted facial hair, nothing to worry about too much. Obviously, keep it in check if it really worries you too much, but it should fall off after you finish Minoxidil. The same goes for any hair that you might get on your chest or your arms or your legs that hasn't gone terminal. So it's likely to just fall off afterwards. As I say, it could go terminal, very unlikely. Now I'm going to talk to you about a potential side effect, acne, and it's not actually a direct cause of using Minoxidil. It's kind of like a reaction that your body may have to the dry skin. So Minoxidil dries out your skin, particularly the liquid kind, and for people who already have acne, this can actually clear up your active acne, okay? So what also can happen, to follow on from that, is that the drying of your skin may cause your sebaceous glands to produce more sebum, which is skin oil, basically, your natural skin oils, which can cause your acne to flare up. Now, I'm not a knowledgeable person in regards to acne in terms of how you can treat it, but I know there's certain drugs like Transitional and whatnot. You may want to reduce your Minoxidil usage or stop it for a while whilst you treat your acne before starting again. Now, there's also a few other things to consider. If you're dermarolling, do not dermaroll over active acne. It's very, very bad idea. You're going to spread your acne. So make sure that you don't do that. So again, it's not actually the Minoxidil that causes it. The Minoxidil causes the dry skin, which can cause your body to react and produce more skin oil, which then is what the actual cause of the acne is. Okay, so some people do report dark circles under their eyes from using Minoxidil. I haven't really experienced it, I don't think. I've always had kind of a little bit of a dark under eye anyway, so I've not really bothered too much about that. But some people have claimed that they have seen that and experienced that. There is a way that you can combat it. One of the ways is vitamin C serum. Now, vitamin C serum is clinically proven to help with dark marks and dark circles under your eyes, so consider getting some of that if you start to notice that your eyes are becoming a little bit darker, okay? Now, another fun question I always get is, does Minoxidil cause erectile dysfunction? No, it doesn't, okay? So there is no evidence whatsoever that Minoxidil causes erectile dysfunction. In fact, many people claim exactly the opposite from using it. However, there are some people on hair loss forums who are also using the product finasteride, which is a DHT blocker that does cause erectile dysfunction, and people get confused between the two. Also, a lot of the people who are using Minoxidil tend to be older, so they have more likelihood of suffering from things like erectile dysfunction, and yet again, they will blame Minoxidil. So you're best to go and speak to your doctors. Every doctor I've ever seen who's commented on this online has said it is not from the Minoxidil. There are always underlying issues that we always identify when the patient comes to us. So no, it's not from the Minoxidil. Also to point out that actually erectile dysfunction drugs are also vasodilators, and whilst they don't work in exactly the same way as Minoxidil, it is stupid to think that a vasodilator is going to cause your dick to go limp. It's not. Okay, there is no evidence for it aside from a few people panicking on forums and not going and speaking to their doctor. You'll never find one of them who have said that the doctor said it was from Minoxidil. It's not, okay? Libido, in terms of your libido, now Minoxidil can cause some level of fatigue, so you might find yourself a little bit more tired. And people who are often a bit more tired are less up for it. So drink some coffee and you'll probably feel all right. But yes, it can cause some level of fatigue that might have secondary impacts on libido, but because Minoxidil doesn't have any androgenic effects, it's not going to make your dick not work, and it's not going to make you not want sex, apart from feeling more tired. That's it. Not answering the question again, I've answered it twice now. So, if you are suffering from side effects and they are becoming somewhat worrisome or troublesome to you, then I would recommend that you stop Minoxidil immediately and you go and speak to your doctor, okay? Because your health is far more important than a beard. That's my opinion. It's the opinion of many of us. I also think that some of the time when you suffer from some of the more mild side effects, it can be lessened by just reducing your dose. So that's my opinion, but always consult with the doctor if you are honestly worried about these things. Okay guys, so there was my guide to using Minoxidil for beard growth. Now, I hope that you have enjoyed that video. I hope it's helped you. I think I've covered as much as I possibly could in one video. If you do have any comments, questions, queries or suggestions, you can put them in the comments box below. You can also contact me on Twitter and on Instagram as well. And do feel free to like this video if you feel like it's helped you. If you want to keep up to date with my videos, then hit subscribe, and I'll see you guys again next time.
You don't rate me 'cause I ain't got a blue tick, but I got one on the top that gave me.
I don't even know what's real.